The Pulse of Providence with Steph Machado on WPRI.com.
Hello and welcome to Pulse of Providence. I'm Steph Machado, and today our guest is the recently departed Director of the Department of Administration, Brett Smiley, who is also a Democratic candidate for mayor in 2022. Brett, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Steph.
I want to start by just asking you, why are you the right person right now to be the mayor of Providence?
So Providence has all of the ingredients to be a world-class city, and yet it always seems just out of reach. And what's holding us back is our inability to get the basic city services and basic infrastructure issues that have plagued us forever right. And what I mean by that is we have chronic pothole and road issues. Nothing makes me crazier than when I see a freshly paved street get cut open by a utility company, which is going to mean potholes for years to come. It impacts the businesses and the families living on those blocks. We have chronic neighborhood flooding because our sewer systems are crumbling. We have health and safety issues because we have sidewalk problems that now we're borrowing for 30 years to go fix. And on the city service side, there are still way too many things that could be done online that require you to go to City Hall or to the city's office building down the street, or worse, to both. And so for working families in Providence, they have to take a day off of work, a bus or two to go down to City Hall for something that could easily be done on a smartphone. And so I'm running to fix all of those things. I'm the only candidate who has management experience of a large organization, who has budget experience of anything close to the budget of the city of Providence, and labor relations experience to negotiate fair and productive contracts with our partners in organized labor. I'm confident that I can actually make progress on those things, and then the city can finally break through to be the kind of city we all know it has the potential to be.
And I want to get back to several of those issues a little bit later in the interview, but I do want to just make sure we get to this at the beginning, this first hiccup in your campaign last month when your first campaign finance report came out. You had made this pledge that you would not accept donations from state employees or state contractors because you were the DOA director at the time. My colleague Eli Sherman and I brought several donations to your attention that you ended up refunding. But I'm trying to understand that were from state contractors, but I'm trying to understand, why did you accept them in the first place? How did this happen when you had seemed keenly aware of the potential appearance of impropriety if you took donations from state contractors? How did you end up accepting and in some cases asking folks for donations?
So as you rightly point out, I was aware of the potential conflict, and I was proud that I held myself to a higher standard and took some additional voluntary prohibitions on my fundraising while I was the director of administration. It turns out that a few people were contractors. I was not aware that they were state contractors, and as soon as I was made aware, the contributions were promptly refunded.
But when you made the pledge, listen, it's Rhode Island, so a lot of law firms have state business, a lot of construction companies. There's so many businesses that have contracts with the state. So were you not expecting that you'd need to go through and check your list of donors with the state contract list? Like, was that, you used to work in political consulting. Like, I feel like you are well versed in campaign finance and could have, reviewed everyone who you were asking for a donation or receiving one from. Was that not done?
It was done, but obviously our systems weren't tight enough. The state does business with thousands of vendors, and so a few slipped through, people that I had no idea that they were doing state business. And again, as soon as I was made aware of it, the contributions were promptly refunded. The contributions were never spent. They were returned within days of being made aware of it. And now that I'm no longer a state employee, that's not an issue anymore.
Your next campaign finance report that comes out will have the first 2 months of it or so will be when you were DOA director. Will we see any refunds on that report for any donations you got while you were DOA director?
Yeah, yes, you will. You'll see the same refunds that were disclosed to you and the other members of the press a month, 6 weeks ago when this issue was in the news.
Do you believe, now that you have left your position, that moving forward you can receive donations from people who may have financially benefited from a contract with DOA when you were director?
The prohibitions against fundraising from state vendors was solely as a result of my position. And so now that I'm no longer a state employee, I don't have any ability to help or hinder or impact a contract. And so there are no longer any restrictions on who can donate. And I would say that even when I was DOA director, that's really not how it works. These contracts are competitively bid, uh, awarded to the lowest cost, highest qualified vendor. And so at this point now, there are no restrictions on my fundraising, and I'm happy to accept the support of anyone who thinks my vision for the future of Providence is the right vision.
There is a GOP ethics complaint against you about this. Your lawyer has responded, and the Ethics Commission says they're going to investigate. So we'll let them do that. But what I'm wondering is, your goal in making this whole pledge was to avoid the appearance of impropriety. You now have an ethics investigation as you launch your campaign for mayor. So did you fail to avoid that appearance?
Well, like I said, I'm proud that I held myself to a higher standard, and I don't accept the alternative, which is if I had not taken this pledge and if I had not attempted to do the right thing, it suddenly, that's not better. I think we want politicians to try to do their best to avoid conflicts, to hold themselves to a higher standard, and to keep the public's trust. Particularly when it comes to money in politics. And so I don't regret the decision I made, and I'm glad that I was able to receive all the support I did in the last quarter of last year.
Okay, moving on to other topics. Listen, as a person that was just in a very high-ranking position in government, I'm curious what you think about Governor Dan McKee. How is he doing so far, particularly in the COVID response?
I think Governor McKee's doing a nice job so far, and I'm really optimistic about his tenure. We're still in the throes of a crisis, so I think all Rhode Islanders should be rooting for his success. I know that I am. I respect and admire how closely connected he is to municipal leaders and to city and town officials, which is really the elected officials who know their communities best. And so I think he's doing a good job so far, and I will continue to cheer on his success as we go forward.
You had an op-ed in the Providence Journal a few days ago about how you would spend this $131 million of stimulus money from the Biden administration that's going to Providence. Listen, this is a cash-strapped city, and so any windfall makes city leaders very excited. But it sounded like you wanted to, well, I'll just let you explain. How would you spend the money if you were mayor right now?
Sure. So this is one-time money, and that can't be stated enough. The city has chronic structural deficits, and it's really important that city leaders not use this one-time money for recurring expenses, because all that's doing is putting off tough decisions in the years ahead. So we know we have a backlog of infrastructure issues. In fact, the city embarked upon an ambitious capital improvement plan, a $300 million capital improvement plan, which they're borrowing for 30 years for. There's no reason that they can't do some of those capital projects with this money, with the money they have in hand, and not have to burden another generation of taxpayers with those debt payments. They should consider investing in their digital infrastructure. We all know that IT projects are expensive, and I can tell you from having been inside of government, the political incentives of doing the expensive IT project, there are many reasons not to do it because there's a lot of risk, but it's also the only way in which we're going to drag the city into the 21st century. That means putting services online, making it easier to get copies of forms online, pay bills online, so that we can just make it easier to either run your small business in Providence or be a taxpayer and a citizen in Providence. And then finally, I think the city should take a hard look at making an additional payment to the pension system. Looming over all decisions in Providence is this $1 billion unfunded pension liability. And we're never going to be able to move forward as a city until we reconcile with that. We have an opportunity right now where we do actually have money that was unexpected, unbudgeted for. And so I think it would make a great statement towards responsibility to make a supplemental payment. I think that would be meaningful to the retirees who are planning on that for their retirement. And it also would be meaningful to other political leaders, such as state leaders, that they knew that when Providence had more money, they did more. because there will come a day when Providence does not have more money and might need help. And it'll be helpful to say when we could have done more, we did.
And just to explain to our viewers, the rules about the stimulus money, you can't directly use it to make a pension payment, but of course they could use it to spend on something else, which would free up money to potentially put more into the pension fund. And I'm wondering about that large unfunded liability in the pension fund. What are your ideas to shore that up? Because we know there have been some unsuccessful proposals, most notably the sale or lease of the water supply that Mayor Elorza had proposed. What are your ideas for that?
Yeah, the city's unfunded pension liability needs to be addressed, and every mayor says it, and they keep on saying that the check is going to come due soon. Well, soon is getting here sooner and sooner. And so my plan is to work with other local mayors. Providence is not the only city with a pension system in distress. The dollar figures are bigger because it's a bigger city and a bigger fund, but on a percentage basis, there are other communities in similar situations. And so if elected, I'm going to work closely with my colleagues in other cities and towns and then come to the state with a distressed community solution where we can work together to shore up weak pensions in distressed cities and towns with the help of the state. I think we should take a hard look at getting into the state system called MERS. If I were a retiree, I would want the stability and safety of knowing that I was part of a larger pool that's better funded, that's more stable, that's more secure. And so I intend to work with other municipal leaders in similar situations to work together on a solution that we can take to state leaders in the future.
As we talk about the city's finances, the next mayor is going to inherit a number of proposals that Mayor Elorza has made in his second term. And we'll essentially have to decide whether to, continue those initiatives and figure out how to pay for them or discontinue them. Notably, he's a proposal for municipal reparations for Black and Indigenous residents of Providence, and he's also floated the idea of guaranteed income. What do you make of those two proposals, and where do you stand on continuing the legacy of Mayor Elorza, who is your former boss?
Sure. So first, kind of at a global level, my priority and my focus will be to get back to the basics, to not get involved in so many of these kind of one-off policy initiatives, but to stay focused on core city services, to improve the quality of our roads and sidewalks, to improve the quality of our sewer system, to include the quality of core city services that we're providing, and to stay disciplined and focused on what the city should be working on, which are these core quality of life issues. On the specifics, first, with respect to universal basic income, I think we've seen through the pandemic, there's so many things through the pandemic that we've learned, or maybe that public policy people like me know about, but now are generally understood, which is that for low-income Americans, low-income Rhode Islanders, low-income Providence residents, a basic amount of income can improve their health outcomes, improve their quality of life, and frankly, stimulate the economy. Look at, most people are getting a stimulus check deposited in their account this week. And we know that that's getting spent and helping our economy. And so while I think it's a noble and an important goal, I don't know that the city should be taking that on its own. And I also know that it makes it harder for us to get our job done at the State House and elsewhere, where they say, well, how can Providence be in distress if they're giving basic income to everybody? Now, in Mayor Elorza's case, he's part of a pilot program with a national grant, so it's not costing us taxpayers anything more. But it's a mixed message to send to state leaders when you're also asking for additional state aid.
Right. I hear a lot of folks saying, wait a minute, isn't Providence have this huge pension problem and struggling with to balance its budget every single year? Are we talking about sending checks to everyone? So is that the sense that you get when you're talking to?
I used to hear that all the time when I was at the State House. And I would explain, because I am a friend of the mayor's and I do support a lot of the work that he's doing, that this is a grant funded initiative and it's not actually costing taxpayers more, but it's a tough message when you're then also coming up to the State House with your hand out saying the city needs more help.
And what about this idea of municipal reparations, which I will note that Mayor Elorza hasn't defined this. We don't know if it's actual money or some other way to try and Right now, they're in what's called the truth-telling phase, but this is certainly something the next mayor is going to inherit because it's a long-term policy initiative. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, and so first of all, I think uh, structural racism is real. I think slavery is this country's original sin. I think Rhode Island is has a place in that sin, and in that we have a history of racism and slavery here in Rhode Island, and so I applaud not just the mayor, but really the committee and group of community leaders who've come together for this truth-telling phase. And I think that we can't move forward as a city or as a community until we look that injustice in the eye. That said, I have built a reputation as someone who is a straight shooter, and I don't make promises I can't keep. And I would be very wary about making a promise around municipal reparations at the municipal level for a city in the financial situation that Providence is in. And so what I think that I do not believe the Black community needs more empty promises from politicians. And so I respect and admire the work of the committee. And I think the understanding as a community our history so that we can look it in the face and make changes to policies is good and important work. But I'm not in a position to say that reparations are practical or realistic at the municipal level. And I don't think it does anyone a service to make an empty promise like that.
I want to ask you about policing and police reform and funding, which has been a huge topic in Providence for a while, but particularly over the last year. We had a 9-hour public hearing last summer where people called for defunding the police. And actually, that was a budget hearing for a budget that has not yet passed. We also have a lot of violence in the city of Providence. We had a violent year in terms of gun violence in 2020. So I'm wondering where you stand on this. There's been proposals to shift funds away from the police. There was also a contract passed by the city council last night to give police pay raises. So could you talk about this issue a little bit?
Sure. So I think that Providence needs to continue to first stay invested and committed to its community policing model. We've come a long way as a community, and the police department has come a long way. Going back to the end of the Cianci era, the FBI was getting ready to take over the Providence Police Department because of patterns and practices of discrimination and abuse. And now we are an accredited, nationally recognized department who have embraced community policing for a long time. There's more work to be done, but we are definitely on the right path, and I think that that's terrific. I also think that our understanding of what help people need has evolved in a very helpful way, and I think it's terrific that the city council and the mayor are looking at pilot programs and other ways to ensure that we have social workers, mental health workers, addiction workers who are part of a response team, because when the call comes into 911, the person on the other end of the call might very well need a ride to the hospital, a shot of Narcan in case they're overdosing, might be having a mental health crisis, and the appropriate person to respond might not be an officer with a firearm. And so my general view is that we need to continue to lean into and invest in community policing. We need to explore and try out some of these alternate models of crisis response, which are showing some promise around the country. And then finally, we need to continue to diversify not just the police department's recruiting classes, which the city has done a good job. The last several classes we continue to say this is the most diverse class ever, and then the next class seems to be the most diverse ever, which is great, and that's progress. But we also need to see diversity in the leadership ranks of the Providence Police Department, all of which are reflective of the community which they're serving.
Right, and we have a new police academy scheduled to happen this year, and we'll see if that, once again, is the most diverse academy. But some people say, why are we hiring more police officers? I thought we were talking about defunding. Do you think that we should be hiring these 50 new police officers this year?
I do. I think that I don't support defunding the police. Like I said, I support these alternative crisis response teams, and I think we should continue to explore those. But the people of Providence want safe streets. They want presence. The business owners of Providence want a visible police presence. And so long as we stay committed to community policing and a diversified police department, I think continuing to recruit and retain for what is a very difficult job is important.
I have sort of a general question that does touch on diversity. We don't know what the mayoral field is going to look like yet for this race. There's plenty of time for lots more folks to jump into the race. But as it stands, the people that have expressed interest look more like the residents, the greater residents of Providence. And we have a diverse field of candidates that have expressed interest so far. So why should residents in neighborhoods across the city elect you?
So I think that the field of candidates looks like the city, which is great, and I think that that's exciting. But I also know that what every resident of Providence wants is to know who can deliver for me, who can improve the quality of the school in my neighborhood for my kid, who can make it safe for my kid to play in the street, who can make my store in a retail center, whether it's on Truckstone Avenue or Hope Street, thrive. And so what I hope residents will have the chance to ask all of us is, how can I trust that you will actually get it done? And in my case, I'm the only person who served as the city's first chief operating officer, the state director of administration, the governor's chief of staff. I have unparalleled government experience to show that I know how to get things done in government, to make it easier to do business, and to deliver services better and more efficiently.
What are you planning to do, now for the rest of this year? You just left your job. Are you planning to seek other employment? Are you a full-time mayoral candidate? Will we see some policy rollouts coming from you? What's the plan?
So I'm a full-time candidate for mayor from now until the primary election in September of next year. This has been both my dream and my plan for many years now. And so my husband and I have been planning and saving for this, and had always planned on diving in full-time. The job of mayor is a total all-consuming commitment, and I think anyone who wants that job should make the same kind of serious commitment. So I've done what I needed to do in order to be a full-time candidate, and in the months to come, as we turn the chapter from the pandemic and we can start to gather again, you'll start to see policy positions and neighborhood parties, and going door to door to have a chance to listen to residents in every corner of the city.
And hopefully campaigning will get back to looking a little bit more normal when this pandemic is over.
I hope so.
Brett Smiley, former DOA director and Democratic candidate for mayor of Providence, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Steph.
And thank you for watching Pulse of Providence. We'll see you next time.